Welcome to the 7th video in our Quadcopter Building for Beginners series. Now we're starting to look like a real quad now. In the last video we actually put the receiver on here, and then at the end of that video, in between that one and this one, all I've done is I've attached the top deck, which is just held on by these risers and screws, and I've also popped in that little plate at the front for the FPV camera. I've attached the receiver into the frame, so that again is just connected with one individual cable here because we're using PPM, and we had that all working. So now I've just kind of popped it on here, and you could either velcro it to the top plate or just put it anywhere in the quad where it's going to fit. You don't want anything coming out of the side proud of these plates, because you tend to find that the way the props work is they're going to go very close to everything, so you want to try and keep all of the cables, like this one here, inside the body. You don't want anything coming outside because there's a chance they're going to get caught. Now all of the connections for the motors and ESCs are temporary, so we made these off so that we can fire it up. We haven't applied main battery power yet, and we will do that as part of the video. And a lot of the time we're going to go through here is the basics that you have to do in Cleanflight to be able to try your first test hover safely. So it's going to be things like setting up the receiver, making sure that's okay, checking failsafe, checking the accelerometers are okay, setting up the motors and ESCs, then going and testing the motors and ESCs to make sure they turn the right way. Then we're going to do things like set up the flight modes, then go out and fit the props, and then we will be ready to go out and have our first test hover, and hopefully we'll get to that by the end of this video. So a lot of this is going to be spending time in Cleanflight going through those basic settings. These are the basic settings though. There's lots of additional things that you can set up in Cleanflight, and we have lots of extra series on the Nazi 32 that go through all of the bits and pieces that you need to do with that as part of the setup. And we also have additional series as well on things like the Seriously Pro F3, which is what we're using in here. So if you want to know more about these boards, adding LEDs, sonars, GPS, on-screen displays, telemetry, all that kind of goodness, then go and have a watch of those series. We're not intending to cover that here. The idea is by the end of this video we'll have this little guy flying, and then in the next video we'll add the FPV equipment. If you remember, we added that extra little power connector, that JST connector, onto the power distribution board, and we're going to plug in the FPV stuff, show you how to pop it on a frame like this, and then that's where we'll finish this series, and you should be able to have a little flying FPV quad, and then you can go away and find out a little bit more information with those other things on the channel. So the first thing we're going to talk about then is how the radio receiver works and testing the failsafe. So we're going to plug this back into Cleanflight onto the PC. We're going to plug it back using that USB connection in here at the back side, and then we'll have a look and see how everything's set up. So PC time. So we've plugged in the USB cable into the back of the machine so that we can talk to Cleanflight. Now be aware that the props are off for this entire part of the video. We're only going to put the props on at the very end because we don't want anything nasty to happen. Now the motor shouldn't be able to run without the main power supplied, but just a word of caution, it's great to get into the habit of whenever you're doing anything on the bench, just take the props off. It will stop you getting scarred for life and damaging people, pets and property. Now, to set this up, we're going to actually power the entire thing, not from the USB cable, because at the moment I haven't got it plugged into the PC while there's no lights. What I like to do for this part is, we talked about using an external battery illuminator circuit with 5 volts and just plugging that into one of the spare sets of pins on the receiver, and that will power the receiver and also the flight controller, and we need both of those powered up to be able to test things with the radio. Now a lot of flight controllers, when you plug them into the USB power isn't sent to the receiver automatically, so it means that you can't see how the radio is behaving. Now we could install the main power, and that's absolutely fine, we could do that here, but for safety I'm just going to use my battery eliminator circuit, and I'm going to plug it into a spare set of pins in the receiver. So now we have to plug in the USB cable into the PC. Let's also turn on our little radio as well. There we go, it's starting to look like a little setup now, and we'll click connect on Cleanflight. So here is our little model. So there we go, we can see it moving around, and we are first of all just going to check the radio is okay. So we'll Don't forget, we went into configuration in the last video and we set up the kind of connection we have. We have a PPM connection, so that should be working. We go into receiver and we can see everything moving. Now the way it works is as I increase the throttle channel should go up, and again what I'm looking for here is that none of the values go above 2000 and they don't go below 1000, and that they settle about 1500. If they're not settling around 1500, use the sub trims in the menu. If they're going above or below 2000, then decrease or increase the end points of the relevant channel on the radio. I'm not going to go through that because we've done that in lots of other videos, but just be aware of that. That's what the end points and the sub trim is all about. So here I can see that as I move the elevator in this direction, that's how it moves in the display, and it's settling at 1500. The aileron, called roll, is doing the same thing. That's the right way round. Throttle is going up and down. That's fantastic, and again not over 2000, not below 1000. And then the rudder is going the right way too, so it's kind of matching the stick movement. The other thing I've done as well is set that mode switch up, so the channel 5 should be moving as I flick that little switch in the corner, and we're going to set modes with that too. Great. Now unfortunately this radio won't let me turn it off while the receiver's connected. It's a little safety feature. If I try and power this off, it'll say turn off receiver and it won't let me do it, which is quite cute. But if you have a radio that does allow you to turn it off, then what I'd recommend is get into a position like this where the throttle is kind of 50%, and then turn your radio off, and you want to watch the failsafe drop that throttle back down to the default position. So if it doesn't do that, go back in and make sure that your fail-safes are all okay. So now we know the radio stuff is working. That's great. The next thing we'll do then is we'll calibrate our accelerometers, make sure all the sensors are okay, and just move that radio out of the way for a second. So what we're going to do here is make sure that the craft knows what level feels like. If you don't do this, it potentially won't arm, and lots of pilots get caught out. So we're going to go into setup, and we're going to click on calibrate accelerometer with this thing flat. So you just need to keep it from moving. Click it one more time. There we go. So now it is flat on the screen when it's flat in real life. The other thing we can do is calibrate the magnetometer. To do that is you click on this button, it gives you 30 seconds, and you have to rotate the craft in all 3 axes. This shouldn't stop us flying, and to be honest, in normal flying you're probably not even going to use the magnetometer at all. Just happens that this board has one on. Okay, so that's looking really good as well. Now the other thing that we need to do then is set up the flight modes. Let's do that. So if you remember, we actually have, if we go into receiver, channel 5 on that switch is the one that's moving. So that's auxiliary 1 is channel 5. Now if we go into the modes, then this is where we can set everything up. Now I want the default mode with the stick in the top position to be something called angle. And again, we have videos that go through all of this in the Nazi 32 series, but angle is kind of a self-level. It's great for new pilots. Now we can choose whatever control we want to look after this. Auxiliary 1 is that channel 5. If you watch that little green bit move, there it's moving around. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say that whenever the switch is in that low position, this is the range I want. I'm going to click on save. Here we go. So now it's on angle in that top position. So that little green indicator is showing me where the value of the channel is as I move around, and as it goes down you can see the angle turns on, because this is the range that I've set, that if that little indicator is within that range, this is the mode I want. I'm going to want horizon in the middle position, so let's add a range for that. So if I flick my switch into the middle position, there it goes. Actually that's pretty good, so we'll click save again. So now in the top position I've got angle, in the middle position I've got horizon, and in the top position I'm not going to set anything. And the reason I'm not going to set everything is because the default mode on something like this in Cleanflight is acrobatic or acro mode, which is where you have the minimum amount of protection and help to fly the model. Now that is, I would recommend for only advanced pilots. If you're a new pilot, I'd start with angle. As you start to feel that angle is a bit limiting, you can move on to horizon. Once you feel very confident with horizon, then I'd move on to rate. So those are the three things I've got set up. Next thing we need to do then, before we plug in the power for the first time, is if we go back into configuration, then in here we have all of the settings for the motors. Now I'm going to leave all of these as the basic settings. We're not going to go through all of the nitty-gritty about how this is set up, but these should work for us. Now, motor stop is don't spin the motors when armed. By default, when you arm the board, the motors will all start spinning. Lots of pilots like that, some pilots don't. I don't, so I'm going to turn that on. And also, does the ESC support one-shot 125? Now, if we go back to the original video, you'll remember that on the packet it actually says one-shot 125. So we're going to turn that on. And then the last one is disarm motors regardless of throttle value when arming via the auxiliary channel. We're not going to arm via the auxiliary channel. That means all that is just a mode. So if you go into the modes tab, then you can see we could set a range to arm the board using a switch. I'm going to show you the default way that works with most flight controllers. We're not using that, we've not set it up, we've only set up angle and horizon, and when nothing's set it's going to be acro mode. So in that case we can leave it on, it doesn't really matter. So let's turn those two back on, click save and reboot. And now we are ready to potentially apply the power for the first time. So let's just pause the video there. Let me get ready to plug it in properly for the first time. And then when we come back, we're going to spend a bit of time in this motors tab, and we're also going to calibrate the ESCs. So we're at the point now where we're going to apply mains power for the very first time. Now this is a little bit dangerous. The first time is potentially where the magic smoke is going to come out. So I would recommend pause the video, take the model and have a good look around. Make sure that all the connections that are supposed to be negative wires are negative wires. All the ones that are the positive and signal wires are going into the right pins too. That none of the connectors from the ESCs to the motors are touching, because it will absolutely fry the ESCs if that's the case. Make sure that anything that's supposed to be 5 volts is plugged into 5 volts, and anything that's supposed to be plugged into 12 volts is plugged into 12 volts too. Now if you followed along with the video so far, we should be okay, but it's easily sometimes to just get a little bit carried away, and when you're focusing on what's going on is maybe with the power distribution board get the ESCs the wrong way round. So just go around your model very, very carefully and double check absolutely everything. If you've done that and you're happy, then we can try and plug it in for the first time and test the motors and ESCs out. So I'm going to use a little 3S battery. This is a little 1300 milliamp one, and we're going to plug it into the power, but only when we're ready for that step. So what we're going to do is we're going to plug the USB cable that's connected into the flight controller back into the PC. We've also got the radio turned on, just so that that's going to work too. So here we have our model on the screen. Now the thing that we also need to check while we're in here is just check the artificial horizon moves in the right way. Just watch this little bit down here on the bottom right hand side. When we lift the nose up, we should see the middle section slide away. Okay, and also when it tilts left and right, it actually looks like the horizon is tilting in the wrong direction. That is exactly the way it's supposed to work. So now we know that all that stuff is working perfectly. Let's crack on. So we're going to go into the motors. Now here's the motor tab, and this is the very first time that we are going to plug the power in. So fingers crossed, I've checked everything. Hopefully there isn't going to be a bang and lots of smoke. So 3, 2, 1. Okay, that sounded promising. Nothing's exploded. Now if you heard that, all of the ESCs seem to initialize at a slightly different time, so that's something we're going to have to look at. Now if you look at the motor display on the screen here, this is how it's all supposed to work. So let's just make sure that we've got the motors in the right place and turning the right way. So what we're going to do is we're going to click motor test mode notice, make sure that the props are off. Absolutely agree with that. I understand the risk and turn it on. I'm going to now start the motor, which should turn motor 1, and there it is turning, and that's in the right place here. And is it turning the right way around? It is actually. Fantastic. So motor 1 is good. Let's try motor 2, which should be this one up here. That's not turning the right way, so we're going to have to swap when we solder this thing together finally 2 of these wires around, but it is the right motor. That's good. Let's try motor 3, which should be this back one here. That's spinning the right way. Fantastic, and it's the right position. And motor 4 should be this guy up here. That's spinning the wrong way too. So I've got these 2 at the front that when I solder them up, I'll have to swap any 2 of these 3 wires across. Wow, that is cool. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're actually going to calibrate the ESCs. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to unplug the power connector. My radio's freaking out because the receiver's just powered down. I'm going to slide my master to the top position, and that top position is going to be 1850, and that's because that's what was set in configuration. I'm now going to plug the ESCs in, and when the ESCs hear a value of over 1800, they'll go into calibration mode. They'll beep beep beep. We're going to slide the master slider down, and then that, when it gets to the bottom, that should synchronize everything. So let's try it. So we've got the master slide at the top, plug the ESCs in. There we go. We're going to slide the master down to the bottom. Very musical, isn't it? And there we are. They are now starting exactly the same time. Two wants to turn the wrong way, but you know, I'll take that. So now we have the motors set as well. We are nearly ready to fly. So let's pause the video there. Let me get the props out of the bag. I'm going to solder these connectors up properly and just use a cable tie to cable tie them onto the arms so they're out the way of the props, and then we'll come back and we're nearly ready for flight. It's really looking like a quadcopter now, isn't it? So what I've done is I've just gone and terminated off each of these ends, just use a little zip tie around the arms to hold them in place. So now that's nice and neat. I've popped the props on, making sure that the props are the right way round. You want to make sure that each of the props has the little text that's printed on them facing upwards. If you don't, you've got them all upside down. And you also want to make sure that if you spin the prop in the direction that the motors are supposed to be turning, then what you're looking for is that the leading edge is high and the trailing edge is low, so it will be pushing air downwards, which is what you're after. If you check your motors and these 2 should be the same and these 2 should be the same, and they are, then we're almost there. Last thing we need to do then is think about popping on a battery. Now I recommend for this you're probably looking at a battery of something like 1600 to 2200 milliamps maximum. Most people are going to use relatively small batteries, but the smaller the battery the higher the C rating. So each of these ESCs, if you can remember, can supply about 20 amps. They'll burst up to 30 amps if you need them to. These motors at full tilt with these props gonna pull probably 22-23 amps, so that in the whole rig is going to be the best part of 90 amps. So I'm going to test it with a slightly bigger battery than I'm going to fly with, just to make sure we're okay. This is a 40 to 50 2200 milliamp hour pack, so this will be able to deliver 90 to 100 amps without any problem. If you're going for a smaller pack, probably something like a 14 or 1600 milliamp hour pack is going to be a nice size for this model. I would go for a nice high C discharge rating to cope with these powerful motors that we have on the model. So let me think about how we're going to pop this on the top. See, it's absolutely massive. It's all battery, so which is why 2200 probably a little bit too big, but it'll be fine for the test. What we'll have to do is use one of these, just like a Velcro strap to hold it in place. And once it's all together, you want to be able to pick it up. There's like two little notches here in the top that are really good. They should be the central gravity. So if we pick it up by the central gravity, it should hover, or it should hang level, which means for me the battery's going to have to go slightly forward. That's probably where I'm going to need it, so it's just off the back of the front, because we've got all this extra weight at the back here, and the receiver is kind of towards the back as well, so it's slightly tail heavy. So if I put the battery towards the front, we're ready. Last thing about the radio, to arm this board is very similar to all of the Cleanflight and other things that we've played with. What you do is you, with everything powered on of course, hold the throttle to that position. So rudder right, throttle low will arm it. To disarm it, it's throttle low, rudder left will disarm the board. Let's get out in the garden and see if we have a quadcopter. So occasionally you'll put a quadcopter together and it won't work exactly as you expect. This one has lots of vibration and very aggressive throttle control. So join me in our next video where we'll look at troubleshooting. Thank you for taking the time to watch that video. There are lots of other videos on the channel and they're carefully ordered into playlists, so you may find that there are other videos on this same subject that you can go and watch. So I would recommend going into the playlist area of Painless 360 YouTube channel and looking around and seeing what there is. You never know what you might find. Thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe, and happy flying.